All right, today we're talking about how to start a business in a field that you have no background in, learn a lot about it, and even grow it up to $1 million in revenue. And what if you were to do that with your spouse? My guest here today did that. His name is Arzays Davani. I'll tell you more about him in a second, so stay tuned.
Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we feature top entrepreneurs, business leaders, and thought leaders and ask them how they built key relationships to get where they are today. Now, let's get started with the show.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I'm the host of this show, and each week I feel so privileged that I get to talk to interesting founders, entrepreneurs, CEOs from all kinds of companies. We've had Netflix and Grubhub, Redfin, Gusto, Kinko's, YPO, EO, Activation Blizzard. Lots of great episodes in the archive, so go check them out. And of course, this episode brought to you by Rise 25, where we help B2B businesses get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships with done-for-you podcasts and content marketing. And you can learn more about what exactly we do, how we do it at rise25.com, and learn about our new podcast co-pilot platform there as well. My guest is Arzays Davani. He is the creative director and CEO of Davani Group. It's a company that designs, creates, and installs all kinds of bespoke interiors, custom furniture, architectural features, and decorative elements, and things like that. He started this business not knowing anything about the industry at all, just because he saw an opportunity, wanted to start a business with his wife. And he's based now in Seattle, Washington. And Arzai, it's so great to have you here today. And we were talking about your background. You actually were born in Iran, and you came over here with your family. You're about 5 years old. I'm always fascinated to hear different stories of immigrants who came over here and then in many cases started a business either because there were no jobs available to them or because they saw an opportunity. Let's take me back to that period of time. I understand your father started a business after he came over here.
No, he didn't. So we actually, what prompted us to move to the United States was during the Iran-Iraq War. So it was a rough war for the Iranians, and actually bad war for both sides. But close to 1 million people killed on both sides, and my parents did not feel safe. And we were living in Tehran. One of my earliest memories was going under a bunker and hearing loud noises, which later in life you
Bombs.
were
Yeah.
actually bombs.
Yeah.
And my father was, he went on a student visa. He had already graduated college. Actually, my mom and dad met at the oldest university in the world. It's Jump the Shore University. I think it's something like 2,700 years old, believe it or not. So
That
uh,
makes Harvard look like a new kid on the
yeah,
block.
yeah, exactly. That's new school. So yeah, we my dad went to get his master's in Michigan, and so I was away from my dad from the age of 3 to 5. And when he got his master's, he was able to bring us over to the United States, and we moved to Jamaica, Queens, New York.
Okay. And what was that like? Do you remember at 5 what that cultural shock was like for you going from Tehran to Queens, New York?
I do actually. My other memory that's really, really clear was when my kindergarten teacher, I remember her name, Miss Block, she brought me in front of the class, and my mom was there with me. I was hiding behind my mom's blouse, and while the teacher was introducing me, and of course, being from Iran and not being in school, I didn't speak any English. But the great thing about not just New York, but especially Jamaica, Queens, is the diversity. So if you look at like elementary school or kindergarten pick, it's a mixture of, kids from Jamaica, Haiti, Dominican Republic, um, Italy. We have Jews, Indians. So
Yeah.
there would be actually probably, I think, one Caucasian kid
Hmm.
in that class. So it was a very diverse class, but nonetheless, not speaking any English made it a little bit rough. And four of us living in a, 1 bedroom, 650 square foot apartment,
Wow.
probably was not the best either.
Yeah, I wasn't much older than you, a 7 when we moved from, not obviously didn't have the language barrier, didn't have the cultural differences that you did, but I moved across country from where I was born on the East Coast to Southern California. And I remember at 7 years old, going into this classroom with my parents and just feeling like, oh my gosh, what is going on? It's just so intimidating. And that feeling kind of sticks with you, and even in subtle ways. Are there ways that you think that shapes who you are today? Because like today, you strike me as someone who's charismatic and probably really good at sales. And I imagine those skills have stayed with you. Do you think that was shaped by that experience?
100% because we my parents found a way of moving in very pivotal times of my life. So I lived in um Queens until my dad saved up. He was also, he got a job as an engineer, and from 9 to 5, and then from 7 to 2 o'clock in the morning, he was also working as a bartender for a catering company in the city in Astoria, Queens. And he was trying to save up enough money in order to buy a house, which we ended up buying in Long Island. And that was during the 5th grade. So that was a huge deal for us. Like, wow, we have grass, we have a backyard. Like, it's that was like a really big deal. So from kindergarten till 10, 11 years old, 10 years old, which was around 5th grade. We moved, and then I lived in Long Island from 5th grade until I was a freshman in high school. So before I was a freshman, my dad got moved over to um, Cary, North Carolina. Cary, if you don't know, stands also for Concentrated Area for Relocated Yankees. So that was actually a big. I think that was a bigger cultural shock just because I have a
The
more vivid
South.
memory.
Yeah.
It was the South. It was
Yeah.
one. It was during the time that there was the Afghanistan war. So
Mm.
there was a huge thing about, Muslims and people
Mm.
that, look like me. But
Mm.
um in Long Island, like, I fit in. I could be Italian, I could be Greek, I could be Jewish, I could be Brazilian. I it was a big mixture, but in North Carolina,
You
it
stuck out more.
I stuck out a lot more. But what was funny was I felt a little bit more prejudice by being a Yankee, having a really strong, at that time, I had a really strong New York accent.
Mm.
I had a tough time understanding my teachers. They had a tough time understanding me. Um, and back then it was actually a normal thing. You just would see Confederate flags like everywhere
Mm.
and the houses on the back of like the truck. So anyways, they moved me during to Cary, North Carolina. And then right in the summer of going to my high school, I'm sorry, to go to senior, we moved to Charlotte, North Carolina. So then in pivotal
So
points,
hard to
I had
move
to make
at
new
those times.
friends.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I never, but
Did you
it was,
move right before high school, did you say?
yeah, I moved right before high school to
Yeah.
North Carolina.
Yeah. So
And
did
then,
I. I moved right before high school
oh,
also.
you did?
Yeah, so hard. So
Southern
hard.
California?
I moved from I was living in Massachusetts for junior high and then moved back to Southern California, not too far from where we lived before, but still it was like huge culture shock.
It is. You make some friends and then you have to make completely new friends. You're the new
Yeah.
kid. And that was a really big adjustment. So just to circle, I mean, just to answer your question, I think having to adapt made me much stronger and made me more adaptable not just different cultures, but I had to find ways to make friends, or else I would be the lonely kid in the corner. And what really helped actually for me in high school, bridge that gap, was getting into wrestling, and I found the community that way.
So me too. 3 weeks before my first day of high school, joined the football team. And so on the first day of high school, and partly did it because on the first day of high school, I knew I had at least, 30, 40 people that I knew, rather than showing up on the first day of school and knowing no one. Because the practices started about 3 weeks before school started. So, that's part of the reason that I did it. So you get into wrestling and whatnot. I think this kind of makes sense knowing that you were comfortable enough going into an industry where you knew nothing, not that dissimilar from going into a new school or a new community or a new state where you knew no one. At least for me, I like to say that I'm comfortable with that discomfort. Sometimes a little bit too much, I think.
Mhm.
So let's talk about that. So what was the opportunity? How did you come upon this idea of starting this business with your wife?
Um, yeah, actually it's I got even more. I decided that I wanted to feel that discomfort, like you said, even more. So after college, I got into finance, and on a whim, I decided to buy a one-way ticket to Dubai in 2007. And that was back when nobody knew what Dubai was. I think it was
Yeah.
2009 where CNN or 60 Minutes did like a special on it. So that was a unique experience, and I had started a startup. I started and sold a few businesses while I was in Dubai, but I start one of these startups that had we had a patent that had reinvented wood using recycled plastic
Mhm.
and rice husk, which is the excess waste of the rice husk, to create a better green alternative to wood. And I had put up a post on a forum, and somebody had reached out to me interested as an investor. She had a client that was interested in sustainability based out in Ukraine, and at that time it was Skype, and we had a meeting. And anyways, long story short, that person ended up becoming my wife. So
The
we
investor or the person that was
person whose
okay.
client
Okay.
was an investor, uh,
Nice.
and she had a consultancy company where she was consulting um, Italian companies, but also she had a major client in Ukraine that was the largest producer of starch in Europe, and she had been pushing sustainability projects on them. So, anyways, that's how we met. And we ended up moving to San Francisco together. And I stumbled across a catalog. We were trying to figure out what business we need to do something together. Because that startup that I had, what was interesting about it is we got a large purchase order and we were not able to fulfill it because the joint venture with the manufacturing company in Malaysia was not able to meet that demand. So it was a really big life lesson for me, realizing that as good as you can be in business development and strategic partnerships, if your manufacturing is not able to fulfill those orders, then it doesn't mean anything.
And
So
did you run around like a madman with this purchase order, like knocking on doors of other manufacturing facilities, seeing if you could find one that could fulfill on it, or was it like too far? You know, the ramp up period was too long that you couldn't do that.
well, it was multifaceted. We actually had a joint venture with this company that has been around 40 years. We had hired I believe it was Deloitte. So we hired like a legit company a consultant from a company that flew out and spent 3, 4 days in the factory auditing their books and did all
And
the
in
due
spite
diligence.
of all that, it wasn't. They couldn't handle
In-
it.
yeah, in spite of all that, they were not able because the purchase order was for $10 million for pallets, which was not something we were like thinking about, but they just were not able to like fulfill it.
Mm.
So as my wife and I were looking into new opportunities, I came across a catalog of a beautiful marble company that had beautiful furniture and had done these exquisite projects in Saudi Arabia and Dubai and Russia. And I was like, honey, what is this? She's like, well, this was one of my clients. And, like every Italian's dream, their dream is to make it in America. So I was like, all right, well, let's meet them. She's like, I know the CEO would love to expand. He's been asking me to. So anyways, before getting in bed with that manufacturer, of course, I spent a lot of time in the manufacturing side of things.
Even
Uh,
more due diligence that time, I imagine,
yeah.
right? Yeah,
So,
yeah.
which taught me a big lesson. What was a big heartache because I spent about 5 years of my blood, sweat, money, working on that startup. As a result, I met my wife, and I had a huge lesson that was able to make me successful in my next venture. Um, because I thought, hey, as long as you can do sales, like that's all that matters. You bring the deals, and everything else will fall into place. But it's not the case.
Yeah, yeah. So, how was it working with your wife on this project?
It's a lot of people warned us like, no, don't get into business with your family. This is a recipe for disaster. But if you look at some of especially in Italy, you know, all of these manufacturing companies, we're talking 50, 60, 80, in some cases 150 years old. So they're all family businesses. So I didn't want anybody's opinion or their own reality to affect mine. I wanted to create my own story and I wanted to create a legacy that had our name on it and create something with my wife because, you know, marriage is, when you get married, it's like a startup, right? It can even be like a merger. You have two companies that are merging together, but to
Hmm.
create something together and to find a way to coexist and use each other's skill sets because we're also both visionaries. It's not like one of us was an accountant, finance background, and the other one was just, purely vision. We both had really big ideas. And I think the biggest challenge of working with your spouse for us was separating, like, stop talking about business.
Yeah.
Because we found ourselves, in restaurants in San Francisco that we were living at the time. We're just like, we're always talking about business.
Mm.
And we're like, we have to figure out a way to separate that. And it's not that it felt like work because we both loved it, but it's not healthy. There's more to life than your business.
Yeah. Now I'm looking at your website here, and you do custom marble installations, desks, conference tables, dining tables made out of stone. These are big, heavy items. I imagine there were people that said to you, Arzays, what are you thinking? Like this is gonna be such a hard project. You got to ship these things over, and what if people decide once it gets there that they don't like it? How did you manage all that? That just seems like very big barriers, especially for someone that was new to this industry.
That's actually how we started, but we've made it even harder for ourselves. It's even more complex because now we're doing complete homes and villas that have stone, wood, metal, glass. So we're doing the entire home, the kitchens, the bathrooms, the bars, the wine cellars, the interior, the exterior.
Wow.
We are the contractor's primary subcontractor in
Mm.
some particular projects. So that's what we bring to the table and where we found a really big niche in the market is, when you're working on, homes that are $60 million plus,
Mm.
um, they require a different level of craftsmanship. They require a different level of service. And it's not something that you just want to offer right off the rack because a lot of times people there's a big difference between luxury and premium. Uh, People may think that buying a suit from Giorgio Armani is luxury, but in this true definition, it's actually it's a premium product because it's something you're buying off the rack. It's something that's been mass produced. What is true luxury is having something tailor made, in our case, having having that bespoke service of making sure we are providing that perfect material for the client, the perfect wood, metal, glass, leather, and stone. And then not only are we prefabricating everything in Italy, but then we're also flying our installers from Italy to do the final installation. So it's
Wow.
100% Italian made and Italian designed. Because going back to the suit thing, it's like, all right, I can just buy a suit for $5,000, $10,000, from Giorgio Armani, or I can go to a tailor. I can choose my own fabric. I can have it measured, and then they make it, and then I have to go back, and then they have to retailer it to make sure it fits perfectly around my neck, my chest, my waist. Maybe have my initials on there. So that's what true luxury is. It's like one-to-one bespoke for that particular person. It can't be replicated. It's not something that, you can say, oh, I got it from, you know, so and so or so and
Yeah.
so. It's unique for that particular project.
I'm looking at some of your projects here and they just look phenomenal, beautiful, timeless buildings. And actually, this weekend, I was just in San Francisco. We had our EO San Francisco holiday party, which was actually at the Fairmont.
Oh,
And I was actually remarking to my wife because we were going, this building's 125 years old or something like that, which in San Francisco is ancient. Maybe on the East Coast is not. Um, And, they had these massive columns in the reception desk, and the reception desk was made out of stone, and everything's made out of stone. And it was just felt so heavy and permanent and timeless. And the Ritz Carlton also is down the
Yeah.
street. Same thing. Amazing, timeless building. You can tell like they build these things, they're going to be around for hundreds of years. What is it like for you working with these clients? Like, what have you learned about working with a client like that that's building a $60 million house that is probably, I imagine, comes from a ton of money or is CEO of a very busy business? Like, what are some tips that you have for working with those types of clients, either the end client or the contractor that you're working directly with?
Yeah, it's I think it starts with like education first of all, because again, I mean we do work on projects all over the world, but if we're talking about particularly the North American market, the country is not that old. So, if you go to like Rome, for example, the whole city has been built on travertine that's over 1,000 years old. Same thing,
Mm,
in Iran and other places of the Middle East and other places of Europe. So there, it's much more acceptable to use stone and use like antique
mm.
material and it to
So
be
you don't have
aged.
to educate people on it as much, whereas here you have to educate them on why the additional expense is justified, I guess, or why they would want to spend the extra money.
Right, exactly. And,
Yeah.
and there's also that hand, it's like we have the latest technologies, but it's also not losing that old world craftsmanship. In some
Hmm.
cases, we have sculptors that are like carving like into the fireplaces or the columns. And these guys are like 70 years, 75 years old, and it's their passion. They're just coming in
Hmm.
because that's their pastime. And it's
Hmm.
fortunately we're finding that to be a little bit of a lost trade. But what's
Hmm.
great is there are people still interested in working with their hands. So that trade and knowledge is still being passed on to the next generation. I just don't know how long that's going to last. But I don't think it will die out because it's artisanal work. You're not going to lose painters, and I don't think we're going to lose people that are going to paint or sculpt because of AI, for
Well,
example.
yeah, I've actually used that example a number of times because there's a lot of people in professions that are really worried about how AI is going to affect them. But those are the industries that probably people will flee to because there will be jobs eliminated through because of AI in other industries where jobs, frankly can be eliminated. But in an industry like that, like an AI can't do it until at least until we have functioning robots that are going around doing it.
Even that, I think it's the authenticity of the human emotion that's attached to that particular product. If you see some of like the videos of these guys working on these materials, they're romancing the material from like selecting the material to make sure it's like perfect to hand finishing it. Even if it's like machine cut, there's still an element of like hand finishing. I think that emotion you can't replicate with like AI or robots. So there's still going to be people that want that authenticity and want that human touch and human element because that's something you can't replicate emotion with AI.
Yeah. I want to take a step back. I'm curious, what is it like for you? You came to this country probably with not a lot of money. Your parents scraped by in order to save money to buy a house, to put you in a better neighborhood. And here you are, you're working with some of the most affluent people in the United States, building buildings that will be here long after we're gone. What is that like for you emotionally to be in the place that you're at?
Well, I don't see myself in a particular position. I just feel like it's like a constant evolution. One of my philosophies is always growth. So I'm always never thinking I've reached a destination, but it's interesting to kind of you know, uh, step back and see that what we do is it's an emotional part of people's homes. Like if you're building a dining table, that's where people laugh, they cry, they have the best memories, they have the worst memories. You're building, in some cases, hotels that, like you said, are going to be here for generations and generations to come, where people save up a lot of money to have these particular memories. So it's really nice to be a part of that. And I am conscious and aware of that when we were taking on these projects because we have the luxury of working with some of the top architects and designers in the world. I'm telling you, these designs that these people are coming up with are like out of this world. And it's all about the human experience. And what's the human experience? It's to create lasting memories, right? Whether you're
Right.
kids, whether you're proposing to your future wife, they're all memories that are going to be last, lifetimes. And actually, maybe those stories will actually pass down to, generations to come as well.
Yeah. And even if I reflect on it, your story is kind of reflected in the company. You come from the old world, you've come to the new world. As a human, you immigrated here, and you are bringing the old world for each of your clients to the new world in a way that will last.
That's very interesting. I never thought of it that way, but I can definitely see the correlation.
Yeah, yeah. And you and your wife, you actually ended up kind of splitting it off the company. Is that right? Do you still work together, or did you separate it and now you don't work together?
No, we 100% still work together. My
Mm.
wife, she got pregnant about 7 years ago. She took some time off. She took about 3, 4 years off, which, again, for me, it was a little bit difficult because, I didn't have my rock and I had to figure things out. But that was actually a moment where we also pivoted and I made some decisions that took the company in a different direction. We started our own brand during COVID, which actually we have the Davani Group, which is custom projects, and then we have our brand Davani, which is high-end furniture that's sold around showrooms. So it was a difficult time, but it was also an interesting time because, the company did end up going in a different direction, but now she's back and thank God for that.
Yeah. And I know this has been a tough year for you. I'd love to know you kind of reflecting on, we're recording this at the very end of 2024. The economy has been very up and down for a lot of different companies, especially, I believe, at the kind of higher end. And then you also had kind of a hacking, I guess, that affected you personally, a couple $100,000 worth of money of yours that was lost. So just kind of reflecting back on this last year, what has it been like for you?
Oof, man, it was a really, the year started off really tough. It started with like a huge storm where we ended up getting a random leak in our house that, cost us, thousands and thousands of dollars. I had to replace my roof. 2 weeks later, I get hit by a lawsuit by our neighbor,
Oof.
that didn't like the fact that we put a metal roof there. Uh, 3 weeks after that, and 3 weeks after that, again, it was the first quarter. So we invested a lot into working capital. We invested a lot into marketing, and our sales cycle is long. So we found ourselves actually extending ourselves for the first time and dipping into our line of credit. So financially, we were probably also at our weakest. And then, um, top of that, I had a knee injury. A week after that, I got into a car accident. 3 days after that, my wife, as she was backing out of the garage closed down on her car with the kids in it, shattered like
Ooh.
all the glasses. And
Ooh.
um, 2 days after that, so you can see back to back to back. 2 days after that, I get a call that somebody had hacked into my Coinbase account, and my account was compromised. And long story short, I had my Coinbase account completely wiped clean, well into the six figures.
Wow.
So those like sequence of events, it was like six at a time, six, seven at a time, which happened over a course of, I would say, 6 to 7 weeks. I kept a really positive attitude the whole time. My mantra during that time was, "This too shall pass. This too shall pass. This too shall pass." But when the Coinbase thing happened, I kind of like prayed, and I asked, like, well, what is the lesson? What's the lesson I'm supposed to learn from all this. I know this will pass. Thank God it's not my health, except I hurt my knee, but it's nothing serious. My family's okay. But what is the lesson? What am I supposed to be learning here? What is in it for me? Because there's always a lesson. And I would say 5 days after that, it was on a Friday, and I was at Costco. It was 4:30. All of a sudden, I get a phone call from my lawyer. Your neighbors want to drop the lawsuit. And then 10 minutes after that, I get another phone call that we closed a very big deal. 5 minutes after that, I get an email confirmation of another deal that closed. I didn't realize until later that evening, as I was writing in my journal, that, oh, my aha moment, the lesson for me had nothing to do about finance or managing your money or being a little bit more careful. As I was reflecting in my journal, the lesson for me was that as bad as things can be and will be and can get, things will turn around even faster.
Hmm.
And I was like, wow. And it was in a matter of 25 minutes. Even though those sequence of events happened like in 6-7 weeks, in 20 minutes, everything was just like, again, changed. Just like that. And I was like, wow, that's what it was. Because I had no idea what the lesson was.
What a tough year. What a tough year.
Oh, what a blessing. And I'll end it with this. We are ending in our strongest year ever. We have grown by 30%. We're hiring an additional 4 or 5 people. So we started off in the worst financial position that we were in 9 years, because of the fact that we dipped into and started really dipping into our credit line, into ending it with our strongest.
Well, that's hopefully a good sign for the economy as we head into 2025. Arzays, I want to wrap up with my gratitude question. So I'm a big fan of gratitude. I'm a big fan of giving guests the space and opportunity to acknowledge anyone, especially peers or contemporaries that have helped them in their journey. Anyone you would want to, point out?
Yeah, I actually like to point out 3 people. One is my wife, that put me on the journey of like constant growth. And Tony Robbins, who, was an instrumental mentor for me, that, resonated the constant and never ending improvement. And as a result of being on this path of nonstop and never ending growth, being introduced to EO, entrepreneurship organization, that also consists of like-minded people that are always looking to grow and improve themselves, their businesses, and their family and business life. So I would, those 3 pillars, I think have been instrumental in my growth, and it's not going to stop here. I just want to constantly grow.
Yeah, that's great. Arzays, where can people go to learn more about you and the Davani Group?
You can follow us on Instagram at thedavanigroup.com, and our website is www.thedavanigroup.com.
Some gorgeous photography on your channel, so definitely go check that out for Arzays. Arzays, thanks so much.
Thank you, John.
Thanks for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.